Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. This is the third episode for 2022. Welcome to the show. And I am Tracy Stuckrath. And I'm excited to announce that starting today, we're live not only on Facebook, but on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So getting out to the social media world here. And it is, as I said at the beginning of the year, beginning of January, it is dry January as well as veganary. So on my show today, I'm excited to have plant-based and flavor-forward chef Robin Asbell, an author, an educator, and a culinary creator. Robin and I actually met 8 years ago or so when she was in Atlanta and I was working at the Cook's Warehouse. And I think you're the first person to taught me how to juice. So welcome, Robin.
Well, hey, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So I'm really excited, actually, before I ask you any questions, I'm really excited about how you put it, plant-based and flavor forward, chef, because a lot of people do plant forward, but I like that flavor forward term. Can you talk about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we've been trying to live down the bad rap that somehow eating healthy doesn't taste good, for years and years. And so I really think that, there are people who cook just so they can eat to live. And I am not that person. I want everything to be super delicious. So I will take, and I use the same techniques and methods that other chefs use to concentrate and uplift and season. And so yeah, I'm all about the flavor, baby.
Well, and flavor means spices, and not I remember a woman having actually an allergic reaction to a food she had at an event in Atlanta because they wanted to flavor up the broccoli and they put like a ranch spice sauce on it or something, and that had gluten in it or something in it that she was allergic to, and because they wanted to make the broccoli taste better. But I'm like, broccoli, if you steam it the right way, tastes fine.
Yeah, and just let people know. I mean,
Right.
gluten isn't something you should throw around.
Right.
So you have to be careful, and people who have issues with food definitely need to let their cooks know. So because I do a ton of that. I mean, I wrote a gluten-free book as well, and I do a lot of cooking for people who are also gluten-free. So
Okay. Well, so I have your book and I posted it on Instagram today, Juice It, and this is the one that I got 8 years ago. But you've got the vegan meal prep book behind you. But you were telling me earlier that you were writing one book a year.
yeah, for a while there. Yeah, I have
Wow.
11 cookbooks. Yeah.
Wow. And they're all plant based.
Yeah, I mean, some of them have some meat in them,
Okay.
but it's all my efforts. Again, it's my way of sort of trying to get as many plants on the plate for everybody.
And
What,
you started eating that way 20, 40 years ago?
yeah.
Wow. And what was the instigation?
It's funny because people will say, "Well, what's the reason that it's it's been a long time, so I've had a lot of reasons."
Okay.
So when I was 16, um, actually, when I was a little girl, I didn't. My dad hunted, and him
Okay.
and my brother hunted, and it just struck me that why are we eating this one and petting this one, and I really wanted to be a vegetarian then, and my mom said you cannot be a vegetarian yet, you're too young. So then when you're 16, so she thought if she put me off. So when I was 16, I said, well, I really still want to do this. So she gave me a copy of Diet for a Small Planet, which she had,
Oh,
the Frances Moore Lepay book, and said, if you write a report, now you have to know my parents are teachers. So,
okay.
write a report on how you're going to get your protein, which is like the question I've been asked more in my lifetime than any other. So I did. And so she went along with it saying, well, you know what you're doing. So we cooked together. My mom cooked and she taught me how to cook, and we cooked together. So it was all fine. So that
That's
was,
awesome.
And so then I started reading about nutrition. That was in high school. So I was reading a lot about nutrition just on my own. Um, Actually, I had a senior paper I wrote in high school of all nerdy things about how I thought you could treat depression with nutrition, believe it or not, back in 1980. And that was, did a ton of research down over at the college library.
Uh-huh.
So now people talk about that more, but that was a really radical, weird thing to talk about back then. So
Interesting. Well, you were ahead of the game. So what are the basics of vegan prep? And I'm going to preface this by, I made the decision this month to do veganary. So I'm gluten-free and vegan. But on January 1, I woke up and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to eat today? It kind of freaked me out. And I'm like, nope, breathe, you can do this. And I've eaten really well since then. But what is the basic prep for being a vegan? You have some suggestions?
well, my meal prep plan, which is in the book, is just about, how on one day a week you can, and in each one I cook, a protein, whether it's, a bean or some roasted tofu or tempeh or something like that, a grain, and roast and or, cut up vegetables and make like a dressing and sauce. So you've got all that stuff in the fridge. So when you walk in the door, you've got, stuff where you can go, okay, I'm going to make a bowl, or I'm going to put these things together. And there are all these recipes in the book about, how to put it all together into a really tasty dish. And, and the book actually has lunches and breakfast too. So,
Okay. Awesome. Because it does take a little bit of pre-planning. It's not like I can just go grill a piece of chicken, right? It does take a little bit of pre-planning. Like, and I've made vegan gluten-free lasagna before, and I use the cashew cream, but you have to soak the cashews and kind of get that stuff prepped and ready to go. So it does, but I think regular menu planning prepping is a good thing to do in general too.
you're going to eat better, whatever your dietary, if you have any dietary goals, you're only going to meet them if you have a plan and you have some prep. Because if you are tired and, and hungry, you're going to just eat something probably not part of the plan, right?
Right.
Go for pizza or whatever it is that you're going to do, or just eat some packaged food. So things like, making some of that cashew cheese on the weekend, or, and it's just, it's just thinking ahead, like, well, I should soak those and I should put them in the processor, blend them up. And so, but you've got to have a plan. So,
yeah. And even for just regular ones, my friend Sarah Jane always wanted to shop on one day for the whole week, and get it all there so that she had it in the refrigerator, mise en place, right? So that it's there and ready to go. So one of the questions that we were chatting about earlier is, what is eating lower on the food chain and how do we do it?
Right. So, well, when you think about it, we grow, billions and billions and billions of bushels of corn and grain that we feed to animals. So instead of eating animals, you eat the food, you eat plants, basically.
Okay.
It's just, that's something that we started, again, when I first became a vegetarian back in the 1980s, it was something that we talked about a lot more then. That was more of the way that we described it, as eating lower on the food chain. And that way, because, why feed it to them and then kill them?
Right.
You can eat it yourself. And also, every pesticide that gets put onto food gets concentrated in the animals that eat it.
Okay.
And most of them are will concentrate in the fat of the animal, so it goes into the milk or the egg or the the meat as well. And so you're just going to be, even if it's a sprayed plant, it's got less pesticide, or whatever chemicals, whatever chemicals and toxins are in the environment. So that was a lot of the thinking that was going on for me as in making that choice. It's just, you want to eat fewer toxins and eat lower and live a little lighter on the earth. So this kind of talking about that it's not new. I know it's funny. Michael Pollan and people started writing books about it more recently, but kind of always been true.
Okay, so I'm interested. How has eating plant-based changed over the course of these, 33 decades? I mean, I know gluten-free dining has changed a lot since then. So what have you seen differences? And like aquafaba to me was Veg News actually named it in 2015 invention of the year, I think it was. But what else have you seen that you like?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of like back when I first started, it was just, we really did just kind of get by with some beans and some grains and some tofu, and you couldn't go out to eat. There was really very little. You were lucky, I lived in a small town in Illinois, so it was a big deal to go to a Chinese restaurant and get a tofu stir fry. It was a big deal out in the town. And there were not these groceries that we buy were not in the regular grocery store at all. I mean, I'm actually old enough to remember back when, produce departments were a teeny little part of the store because they, even really, in the 60s and 70s, fresh vegetables were not such a big deal as they are now. Even fresh, I mean, when I was a little girl, that was the case. Things have gotten so much better as far as, but, and I say this is a blessing and a curse, is whenever a diet style gets popular, the food industry will respond with more junk food for us, right? So I remember when, like whenever it is, remember when there was the low carb thing was really, really big. And all of a sudden they actually kicked out like a big chunk of the pasta section at our grocery store so they could put in all the low carb.
Oh, wow.
So, and, so it was just sort of like, because people have to be able to buy, chips and snacks and the gluten-free donut. There was there was a big joke about the gluten-free donut at the co-op where I worked in the 80s, that it was just the most sugary thing we had in the whole place. And people would buy this bizarre little gluten-free donut, for a crazy amount of money. Just, I think because it was at a co-op and it was just full of sugar, it was not healthy at all.
Right.
So what has happened is, now there's all kinds of vegan treats, and this whole vegan meat thing, is very interesting. Because when I'm one of those old school people where I don't crave meat, I haven't been interested in it in a long time. And my husband is also a vegetarian and has been so longer than I have. So he actually does not want a burger that tastes like a burger.
Right.
But I figure, hey, if it helps some people skip a regular burger, then good for them.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so one of your books is on grains, and you said something a few minutes ago, and I'm interested in, I think I was reading something like rice. The grains that we think of most of often are rice and pasta, or rice and wheat, right? So what other kinds of grains? And quinoa is a nice, the one that everybody throws out at vegans these days. But I mean, there are so many other grains. Can you talk about some of those grains that we can incorporate into, and what's the benefit of using other grains besides rice?
Absolutely. Actually, I think I've written 3 books about grains, and I'm a culinary advisor at the Whole Grains Council, and so I've got a pretty deep dive into grains. And so the thing about whole grains is that each one of them has a unique nutritional profile.
Okay.
So first of all, when you eat a whole grain, you're getting the bran and the germ, which is where all, most of the nutrients are. And if you eat a refined grain, I think it's 28, 29 have been removed from wheat.
Oh, wow.
And then they put a few back, right, when they do enriched. But so whole grains and, everything, there's so many health benefits of whole grains. I mean, they're just associated with lower risk of heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very into trying a lot of different grains and using them. just today I was buying some farro that I'm going to cook for somebody. Black rice. Now, if you haven't tried black rice, everybody loves it. It's just a wonderful whole grain, very pretty on the plate. Really interesting. Put it next to some curry or something and something red, and you'll have this beautiful look on the plate. Wild rice. I do live in Minnesota, so we love our wild rice like crazy up here, especially real, hand harvested stuff. And I also have a fondness for millet. That's a gluten-free grain that is very mild and sweet, and I just never understand why it doesn't get more play. But it's interesting because over the years, people be like, well, what's going to be the next quinoa or what's going to be the next hot one? It's like, I don't know. I always think, because what was it a while back? Freekeh was going to be.
Oh, wow.
Really popular and it was an interesting phenomenon because Freekeh they were selling it at Trader Joe's, I think. And a lot of people got really into it because it's relatively high protein.
Okay.
And quick cooking if it's the chopped Freekeh.
Okay.
And so that was like on this big rise. I thought, oh, Freekeh, that's great. And then
gone.
Don't see it so much anymore. And I'm always talking about buckwheat, again, most of these grains are just ancient grains that have, centuries of recipes and foodways behind them. So buckwheat's very Northern European, kasha. So there are tons of them.
And Annette just wrote in here, lentils and corn.
Those are not technically grains, although some of the grain people are kind of embracing bringing in the other pulses and to bring those in. But and dry corn and popcorn, interestingly, people don't realize that popcorn is a wonderful whole grain. So popcorn is a great snack. If you're someone who's really into or corn chips, it's a whole grain snack.
Well, and I don't know if you know Mona Esposito. She is the grain lady in Colorado, and she's working with farmers in Colorado to introduce some of these ancient grains back into and regenerate the farmland there. She was a guest last year on the show. I need to introduce the two of you.
Yes. And, we have a big program here. I've been out to Washington also to go to the Bread Lab.
Okay.
And, where Steve Jones is doing a whole lot of, doing really interesting things with varieties of very sustainable grain. And of course, here we've got they're working a lot at the university on growing kernza. I don't know if you heard about kernza.
No, I haven't. Yeah.
It is a perennial variety of wheat that is kind of the great grandmother of wheat. And, it's one of those things that, let's see, it's really interesting. It's hard to grow. It's not the reason wheat the way it is grow. Is it has good sturdy stalks. It's easier to harvest. But kernza, instead of having a short root, the roots go like 20 feet down.
Oh, wow.
And the plant will grow and keep going for several years. So it's requires much less chemicals or water or any of that sort of input, as they say.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, so you mentioned buckwheat, and you mentioned millet and quinoa. So those are gluten-free grains, but and rice is officially gluten-free.
Yeah.
But putting those I went to an event and they said the rice was not gluten-free. And I'm like, what are you putting in the rice to, some spice or something like that? I don't know. Like, just make the rice without anything added to it. Right.
Rice is gluten-free.
So it's naturally gluten-free. So I just wish that people would do that. Okay. So this morning I made a juice with my Vitamix, but I also have a Huram, which I think yours is what, Juice It is more with the juicer versus the Vitamix. Is there a difference in doing one or the other?
Oh yeah. And actually, I have a book on blending, on how
Okay.
to make things in the Vitamix.
Okay.
And so there's basically kind of two ways. Okay, the Huram that you're talking about is a masticating slow juicer where you put the produce in there and it slowly grinds it up and it puts the fiber out one way and the juice out the other way.
Right.
When you put things in the Vitamix, unless you strain it, you're going to leave the fiber in.
Okay.
So
it's much thicker.
It's can be, you can, but what you usually do is add purified water or kombucha or tea or, I have a lot of recipes in this blender book where, I'll take a blend of vegetable and that way, you put in and you use way fewer vegetables, right? Because you're getting the whole thing instead of getting rid of the pulp.
Right.
And so the, you can put, say, a couple of kale leaves, an apple, and then some kombucha, some lemon juice, some things like that. And then you get this whole glass, or whole pitcher full. And so some people think that's much better because it has the fiber in it, and fiber is very good for you.
Right.
So I kind of go either way. I already eat so much fiber. I don't really need to, you know what I mean? I think it's not something I'm striving to get more of.
Gotcha. So. Yeah. Well, and I drank my juice this morning. My dad and I had a glass, and then I had a kombucha afterwards. I never thought I actually thought it would make it because kombucha is carbonated, kind of be a weird mixture, but it's good to do that way.
Oh yeah, and I love things that are bubbly. I like my, I like my water with some bubbles, and so I will do that. I'll make those kinds of drinks, and then I'll put the kombucha in right at the last bit so that it'll be a little bit bubbly. So
okay,
very fun.
Well, even in the Vitamix, because I was thinking of doing it after it got out of the Vitamix. Oh wow, okay, stirring it in afterwards. All right. So, but one's not better than the other. It just depends on what you want.
What you're, again, if you're looking for the fiber and you want to eat if you want the whole juice,
right,
you definitely want to, go with the Vitamix version. So because, you can end up with something where it's, you're sipping along and you realize you get to and there's like this much sort of sludge in the bottom.
Right.
Some people might not be that into, having all that pulp kind of lying in the bottom of the cups.
Now, I was reading when I was looking at one of these this morning, actually, because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to make this morning. It was the blueberry one, and it said put the blueberries back through the juicer to make sure you get. And can you do that with all the different pulp? Put it back through there to get more juice out of it, or?
That's kind of, and that's, when I first started juicing, I had like the Ancient Champion juicer. I don't know if you remember those. They're like they never die. They were these huge metal juicers where you jammed it through the top and it came
like the whole side. Yeah. Okay.
And it was always recommended that and it's sort of a thing where if you have a really good juicer, hopefully your pulp comes out so dry.
Yeah.
You don't need to. But especially I've found with soft fruit, it'll just sort of scoot through there so quickly and come out still pretty juicy. So if you can put it through again, you'll get a more yield.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, I want to talk meeting menus a little bit because a lot of listeners are in the meetings industry and hotel chefs, and I just went blurry. How can we add more? Where is my thing? Plant-based items to our menus. I mean, easier way. I mean, you mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show, but is there an easy suggestion to do it? Just like start with the plant-based items first. And I actually posted something about that, and then use the meat as an alternative. How do you do that with your clients who you are cooking meat for?
Right. Well, it's always been my strategy when I'm cooking meat for people is to put smaller amounts of meat in the dish, and whatever it is, I put more vegetables in. I just did a TV segment where I, did a pasta where I just was saying, cut the pasta down to, a couple ounces per person and amp up the vegetables, so you just, in all your food, to add a higher percentage of vegetables to the total dish. And that's the thing with meat, is as much as I try to get that down. Just eating a big chunk of meat is boring anyway. It's tires your palate out. It's sort of redundant. So it's better, again, if you can do things where, gosh, I mean, I stuff meat with vegetables. I put a big vegetable rich sauce over it. Of course, stir fries and soups and things, it's easier to, have small things where there are small pieces. Right. That's much easier. I was just over the years, like one time a doctor who was Chinese told me, oh yeah, my family, we always put a little bit of meat in our stir fry, and then we get to the end and no one's even eaten it, but we just never stop, but it was just there to season. So if you look at it as the seasoning, like say you're down south, you throw a ham hock in something, it puts some flavor in your soup. You don't necessarily have to eat a whole bunch of ham, so there's that strategy. And then make your sides super appealing. How
do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, don't of course, just plain old steamed broccoli, but do more, roast it up and put an interesting sauce on it. Everybody got all excited about, say, cauliflower wings and cauliflower steaks. Roast it, braise it, put a puree of it and something else. Just take a little bit more time and build some complexity into it. So something like, and it all depends sort of, I mean, I sort of cook by ethnicity in a weird, it's like if you're having a Chinese meal, do this, or if you're doing, or if you want to do more Mediterranean, figure out a way to, do a zucchini, layered, interesting, or, rolled, or, do something more and a little more labor intensive sometimes, but.
Right. I was in an event last week in Las Vegas, and one of the vegan gluten-free dishes they served at the opening reception was, it was kind of, what is it when you have the sliced potatoes with all the cream on it? What is that called?
Gratin.
Yeah. But it was a potato and mushroom gratin, but without the sauce, and it just had some spices on it. I thought it was delicious. A friend of mine said it needed some spice to it, but it was a nice, beautiful presentation of sliced potatoes and sliced mushrooms. And I'm not a huge mushroom fan. So I was pleasantly surprised by it.
And that's, it is interesting because even to me, as you have this urge to, throw cheese on things, or
right.
You just think, oh, this is not. And then when you try something, if you've really, taken the time to make it well seasoned and interesting, you just realize, oh, it's not lacking,
Right.
We just have such a, because it's very easy to, and we have these sort of chef rules in our head of like, well, this is not done until I've added, cream. And it's just
right.
Not.
So what are your top 5 spices that you use on a weekly basis?
Does garlic count?
Sure.
Oh, lots and lots and lots of garlic.
Okay.
Garlic, fresh ginger, use a lot of those too. And then I just actually was interviewed in an article about how can you make your cooking better this year. And it's just, one was just buy fresh herbs, it's go ahead and use fresh thyme and fresh rosemary and cilantro and basil. It's going to just take your food, up a notch, really make it much more flavorful.
And do you need, when they say tablespoon, dry versus fresh?
Right.
You put more fresh than dry?
3 times is the
wow.
thumb. Yeah.
Okay.
So a tablespoon of fresh is a teaspoon of dry.
A tablespoon of fresh is a teaspoon of dry. Okay, that's a good, because for all those who know, 3 teaspoons equals a tablespoon.
Yeah. And some stuff, if it's basil, you can just go even, you could just keep throwing it in. It depends on, you don't want to put in way too much time, but some things are, I don't know, you can add more.
Okay, thyme, THYME or TIME?
Yeah, T-Y, yeah,
Yeah.
T-H.
Okay.
Some of the twiggy herbs, if you start, quadrupling, or it could get a little intense, but
Gotcha. Okay. The there was one other question that I had for you. Where did it go? Where I apparently I didn't put it on my cheat sheet here. Um, I love how that you in the description that I did for the show is that you're not a preachy vegetarian.
no. And that's the thing is, most of my friends are not vegetarian. I live on the same planet as everybody else. I don't know how to do anything except just lead by being healthy. And if people are interested, I'm happy to talk to them about it. But I've been doing this so long that
Right.
I, and I write about it and I teach about it. So I really have no need to get into it with people. So it's, if people want to talk to me and they come to me, that's fine. But um, so I just sort of try to influence people in a pleasant way, because I think arguing or preaching or any of that is, and especially these days, we
Hmm.
have enough things to fight about.
Right.
Um, I actually was at a big vegan. We have this giant veg fest here, and I was on stage. And I when you are in the group like that with people who are, I mean, there's several thousand people there, and many of them are very, very intense about being vegan.
Hmm.
And some of them will say, like, "Well, I'm not going to go to Thanksgiving anymore because my family won't stop having turkey." And I, especially growing up like I did in a farm community,
Hmm.
um, I've just always taken the tack of, like, I'll bring really good food, and hopefully you guys will eat it and enjoy it. And somewhere along the line, you'll say, that's not so bad.
Right.
Um, and then you can buy my cookbook.
Well, even the other day, my mom made, and I posted about this. My mom made shrimp scampi on and put it over pasta, and so we made the same gluten-free pasta, and then she made her shrimp scampi. She put the scampi sauce on top of it. But what I did is I found a recipe. It was from Epicurious, a lemony pasta with oh my gosh, what was in it? I can't believe I don't know what was in it. It was vegetables and something else, but and because it called for butter, and I just replaced it with a vegan pesto. And she ate it, she tried it, and she's like, oh, it was chickpeas and some a vegetable too. And she's like, oh, I would eat this. And so it's just trying those things out and yourself. And sometimes they don't taste good, right? But I'm not going to waste the food either. But um, yeah.
It's like I say, it's so much of a mental shift that,
Right.
people just assume this is how I build a meal. Meat
Right.
is here, everything else is around it. And it's just such a, I always tell this story because they say my husband's been a vegetarian longer than I have, and he's a carpenter. And so it would
Mhm.
always be, well, we're going to get pizza, and we'll get one little stupid veggie pizza for him, and we'll get all this whatever sausage and pepperoni for us. And this has happened to me. Don't turn your back, because they're going to eat all your pizza, because as soon as they get it there, they realize that looks really good. Look at that. It's got, spinach
Mhm.
and peppers on it. So they would never, ever have ordered a veggie pizza. But
Right.
once it was in front of them, even though they had their pizza, tons and tons of pizza. And so it's just this thing of, like I say, I just want to get the food in front of people. My goal all along is I would like to see restaurants have plant-based options on the menu that are just so good that people order them anyway.
Right.
Just say, I had so and such thing at whatever, Applebee's.
Right. Right.
And I just liked it so much. Or you see it going by, when you're at the restaurant and you have
Right.
plate envy and you're watching stuff go by and you're saying,
Yep.
what's that? And then you try it. So I think that's the only way we're going to move a needle. I would like to see more and more people eating more and more plants. reducing the amount of animal foods that are eaten, just because I'm, realistic about it. I know a lot of people, it's culturally important, and, they have all these, intense memories about eating animal foods, and I get it. So,
yeah. Well, yeah. And when I do my presentations, I'm like, there's 3 different contexts is that people choose to be vegan. I'm sure there's more, but ethical, and sustainability, and then health reasons. And we don't want to question why they chose to eat that way. But you can, and I actually went on a lip smacking foodie tour last week in Vegas, during this convention I was at, and I had never been on one of Donald's tours because I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to eat because I'm gluten-free, and especially this month because I'm gluten-free vegan. I had the best meals, and some of them looked better than the other meals that were being served, and it was all delicious. And so I was so impressed by all 3 restaurants on what they served, and with a little forethought, and what Donald said to me in an interview, which will come out later, is that we can do this. We want to elevate that service level, and they're working with the restaurants to make sure that it can be done and that you're getting what your money's worth. And I think that should happen at events too.
And Vegas has been on the cutting edge of this for a long time. I know an author who did a book called Great Chefs Cook Vegan, Linda Long. And she went out to Vegas back in, really, it was like it was in the 90s. She and all these top chef guys out there, because, give those chefs a challenge. It's like, sure, anybody can sear a steak.
Right.
Show me how you are an artiste with a piece of broccoli. And that really, and show your skills with, building flavor into plant foods. Because it's its own little thing. You can't fall back on a hunk of bacon to make it tasty, but you can do it. It's really, really very delicious.
Okay, so to wrap this up, share with everyone. I ask you your spices, but share with everyone, what is your favorite food and drink?
That's a toughie. That's very tough. It changes day by day, hour by hour. Did I answer that? I don't even know. Gosh.
I think you did. Yeah. I think you did.
I would guess that, what would I say is my favorite food?
You said nuts, and then an English breakfast tea with almond milk.
I drink that tea all day long.
Yeah.
That's my go-to, and I just love it. The unsweetened almond milk, I just do love that. And then, I eat I put nuts in everything. It's kind of my go-to thing. So,
okay. So on a question on that, is that too much fat from the nuts?
No. And see, one of the things, in the, whatever, there was a period when we were sort of anti-fat, which, that's not so much anymore. But also, if you're not eating meat, you can get good healthy fat from the avocado. You remember when avocados are too high fat and nuts are too high fat? No. And the fat in them is such healthy fat, So, I mean, I'm not saying I eat a quart a day, but it's
right.
You can go ahead and throw the nuts in there, and it's delicious. And like you were saying, your pesto, it's really yummy to make your pesto without cheese and say pistachios instead.
Right. Yep.
So.
Yeah, and lots of basil. So I posted your website up there already, but how can people connect with you, and where can they find your books?
Yeah, well, my books are you're more likely to find. Well, you can go to my website, to robinasbell.com, and I've got a page for my books with links where to buy them. Amazon, of course. Not that that's that great, but and I am Robin Asbell on Instagram, Robin Asbell on Twitter, where I'm a little more political. Robin Asbell author on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. So I'm kind of out there. And you can, if you want to reach out to me, there's a contact me spot on my website. So
awesome. Well, thank you, ma'am.
Well, thank you. It's good to reconnect after all this time. I'm glad
Likewise.
you're still making juice.
I am still making juice, and my dad and I drink it a couple of times a week. So it's all good. And thank you for introducing me to that so long ago. And I appreciate it. And thanks for being here today with all the Eating at a Meeting listeners.
Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. We are a live video broadcast once a week on Wednesdays, and then these episodes get turned into an audio podcast. So make sure you download the Eating at a Meeting podcast on your favorite podcast platform. That's the word podcast quite a bit in one sentence. So find us on Apple and Spotify and Google and such. So until next time, stay safe and eat well. Have a good day.